right, everyone. Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, of course. I am Ariadna Arredondo, and I'm the creator of The Always Believer, of a co-creator of Latina Podcast, and the co-creator of King Myers. As you can see, thealwaysbeliever.com, where you can find literally every single link you can think of, and then some. So, um, my name is Ariadna Arredondo, aka I am from Latin America. I was born in Venezuela, raised in the States, and then I moved to Europe. And my story starts there because every single part of my story makes sense to who I am today. Much like everyone else, to be honest, much like everything else in this world. So, um, being raised in Miami, I had a really tough childhood. Being raised in my teenage years in Spain was really tough as well. One of the biggest things about me is that because I had a rough childhood, you can see it on my About page, you can see it in many of my podcast episodes, probably, in many of my speeches and my conferences. One of the biggest things that I always kind of talk about is, on one hand, being sexually abused. That's part of the story, kind of where it begins and kind of where it continues, basically. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, did she just say what she said, like sexually abused? Are we just gonna like start 2 minutes into this conversation and just like talk about this heavy subject? Yes, but in a very much lighter way. Why? Because first of all, we gotta get rid of that taboo subject. There's no taboos anymore. I'm very much for breaking generational trauma. I'm very much for talking about things and being exactly who you are with your trauma, with healing your trauma, with your pink hair, which I don't have anymore. I just changed it 2 weeks ago. Um, with everything else you got going on. So, going back a little bit to my childhood, of course, I was sexually abused. I was in a household by a family member. I was in a household that was full of toxic vibes, of physically abuse, of not seeing what love really is, of seeing my parents in a relationship that was pure yelling and hitting and thinking he was always right and he was always perfect and she was always wrong and she had to do a million things. So, in an environment that very well could have left me in a really bad relationship in my future. Through that also comes alcoholism, also comes machismo, which is, narcissistic men in general. Something that Lisa and me talk about a lot, to be honest, because we have a lot in common in that kind of aspect. And through that rough upbringing, one of the biggest, most constant, most outstanding, most frequent words that I can always say was and is always believe. Now, the reason why I named this speech, this conference, this wonderful 30-minute slot that I have here right in front of you, when believing is the first step, because that's what it was for me. And you can believe whatever you want to believe. It could be in a greater good, it can be in the universe, it can be God, it can be whoever you want to believe. In my particular case, through all the ups and downs, one of the biggest sentences I've always said was always believe that there's something better for me out there. There's something that I can do to make my life happier and brighter. And there has to be something. I don't know what it was. I was from 5 to 9 to 14. There was always something there, believing and going and doing. So, once again, backtracking to the first three sentences basically that I said. Born in Venezuela, raised in the States, moved to Spain specifically when I was a teenager. The first time around, I was 9. We had just a very wild ride from like Spain and Venezuela and Miami, and my parents got back together, and that was really, really bad. But then, hey, at 14, we went back to Spain, my mom and me. that brought so much of a cultural impact and change into my life, and so much anger into it of not understanding, of not wanting to see that there's always better, something, not wanting to understand that there was something better for me. So from 14 to, I don't know, 19, I want to say, it was a very dark path for me. That's where alcoholism was involved. Not mine particularly, but my family members, and something that impacted me a whole lot in order to just grow up to be who I am today. So, throughout this storyline and living, from couch to couch, living from I was working and studying. Granted, I was 14, but I didn't look 14, so I can easily get away. Plus, it's Spain, and it's a whole different set of laws, and so on and so forth. I was at a point, I was a really bad breaking point, roughly about 16, 17 years old, because obviously everything going on to that point was just complete and utter chaos. I was suicidal, not only from thoughts, but actions. I was really just not wanting to be in this world. And once again, some way, somehow, that little voice, whatever you want to call it, made me realize, made me remember, made me say, always believe. So I dropped out of high school because life happened, because I couldn't take my living situation anymore, and I took life in my own hands. Mini parentheses, I'm bilingual from Spanish and English since I was a kid, and something that I'm very thankful for. So this mumble jumble, just roll with it. That's just who I am as well, of both languages. But still, that's kind of why I go back and forth to those thoughts. Anyways, so I dropped out and I moved out from that very toxic living situation with my mom, with alcoholism, with constant guilt. Oh my goodness gracious, constant guilt. I mean, I don't know about you all, I don't know about your families, but if you're anything from this generation or not, families always carry guilt of some sort. And that's what it was constantly. It took me about a couple years to get back on the right road. It took me quite a few toxic relationships of my own. It took me a whole lot of just bumps. They were really, really rocky bumps that I had to experience on my own. However, one of the first things that I did as soon as I could was therapy. So I'm a huge advocate for therapy, without a doubt. And one of the biggest things that came out at that particular time was most definitely talking about being sexually abused. It was kind of like the start of it all, maybe because it happened to me at a very, very young age. I was like 4 or 5 years old the first times. So through that and through therapy, I kept going on and on and on, saying the exact same sentence, always believe. And I'm not sure if that was really my aha moment, like we want to call it, in the sense of, oh yeah, therapy, like that's where it kind of started. I'm like, no, I feel like through that time where I was finally able to say, hey, Ariadna, what do you want with your life? What are your needs? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What is something that really moves you? Did there help? Was therapy always helps. So probably two and two together. And for me, it was always helping people. I felt so alone growing up. And this is why I don't want to be known as a person like, oh, it's Ariana, she got sexually abused. Like, no, no, no. Like, it's not about that kind of label by any means. But when you first meet me, or when you first, especially for these kind of events, or even my About You page, I write it because I don't want it to be taboo, because I've had so much pain and so much hurt thinking that it was my fault, thinking I was the one who said yes and I was the one who kept the secret. I'm like, no, through that, just not so quick shift of mindset, I was like, no, I'm the victim. And the number one thing I want to make sure is to let people know that we're not alone, because we're not. We are not alone at all. There's too many people in this world. There's too many different kind of stories, but the same kind of stories all coming together to know we're not alone. So, let me retrace my steps as my lovely little kitty's trying to get into the door. Anyways, um, therapy and being sexually abused and all that, right? I wanted to help people. I started doing conferences. I started raising my voice. I started making petitions and files and things like that to make sure that this was a huge change. By then, as you kind of follow the timeline, I was living in Spain. So everything I did was in Spanish for obvious reasons. And I really tried to make a change within the community, within the city I was working at or living in that moment, and so on and so forth. What was my next step? Still healing, still therapy, still working through it. I was like, how else can I help people? I became a teacher. When I was in Spain, I became an English teacher to be exact. I adore kids. I always felt very, what's the word, like in tune with them. But once again, I feel like the main reason behind that is because I felt alone as a kid, and you don't know what kids are hiding because they think they have to hide things. So I'm like, I want to be there. I'm going to be a mentor. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to do a coach. I'm going to be a guide. I'm going to do whatever I can within my reality to help these little ones feel better about themselves. So throughout that journey of me being an English teacher for 10 years, on the flip side, that also meant, once again, more and more healing. As I healed being sexually abused, it's always there, but it gets better. It really does. I had to digest family trauma, breaking generational trauma and drama and everything else in general. I had to deal with a very abusive father. I had to deal with an alcoholic mother. I had to deal with, who am I? What am I doing in this world? So, some point of life, mid-20s, once again, I was right smack down in the middle of, again, toxic relationships, still figuring out, still going through things. I created the Always Believer. Obviously, the name comes hand in hand. Obviously, by now you understand Always Believe is what I always said. I didn't want to name it alwaysbelieve.com, for example, because I was like, you know what? Because I know we're not alone, and because I know there's someone out there who experiencing what I'm experiencing, or a 5-year-old who's going through the same thing. And I'm not even talking about being sexually abused. I'm saying just a toxic household, or because they're overweight, they feel really bad, or because of whatever it is they're going through. A 5-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 55-year-old can understand me. I was like, I'm going to name it the Always Believer because that's what people are. You are the Always Believer. I'm too. It's my creation. It came from this little head of mine. But it's a movement, it's a place, it's a safe place where you can say, I'm also the Always Believer. I'm also a person that has gone through X, Y, Z. Coming out, I'm also bisexual, and I'm very loud. I'm very loud. I'm also very loud. But no, I'm very proud. Coming out was also a process. So anything that you've gone through, there's so many different background stories to say, hey, I'm an Always Believer. Hence the name. So much so that one of my best friends since childhood that stuck with me, she's like a sister to me, she also had her fair share of stories and trauma. She's like, Ariadna, and we both love tattoos. It's like, you always say always believe versus you were a kid, and it stuck with me. It was with me, and I feel like I'm part of it. I'm like the always believer, like I get it. And this is way back before I started the blog. Maybe not super way back. I think it happened the same year. She was like, I'm going to get it tattooed. I'm like, girl, if you're going to get it tattooed, I am too. So we have tattooed always believe because it's the essence. Those two words are your two words. Those two words we all have. That sentence, that quote, that vibe, that feeling, that thing that resonates with us. So anyways, that's how I created the Always Believer. And what is the Always Believer now, you ask? What do I do? So back in the day, it started as a blog. I wrote, I've been a writer since I was 10 years old. I absolutely adore journaling and creating and art. No, I'm not a good artist, but creating throughout writing, basically. So it started as a blog way back in the day, um, where I just shared my stories. Then through that, I created a movement called Go to Fly. And it means go live your dreams, do them, like go follow through, and then you can fly. Now, that's kind of a play on words, which I'm a huge play on words pun kind of girl. And I call our community Team Flyer because of the movement Go to Fly. So it started, like I said, with a blog. I reached out to every person possible because I knock on every single door possible because that's what you got to do in life. You got to keep on going and keep on knocking and keep on getting back up to get what you want. And I started sharing stories from people around the world. They sent me their story like through a blog kind of text, this picture, and that's pretty much it. And it kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And all this while I was still being an English teacher, while I was a foster mom. Oh my goodness. Like I said, anything to give back to the community, I'm just on it. And I just love kids so much. And I even put myself through back to high school, back to college, did a little bit of marketing, did the whole shebang basically. It got to a moment that I'm like, I want something more. I don't know if people are going to read this anymore, if like, what are we doing with our lives? I miss talking to people. So I created a podcast. And if you met me before podcast, any single of my friends are like, Ariadna, you need to talk. You're able to help other people talk and share their stories. And that's what I did. So with The Always Believer, we do have a podcast. I do. There's 2 seasons so far. We're finishing it this next week, I was going to say July 31st. We have new episodes every Wednesdays. And we share Go to Fly stories. We have incredible people like registered nurses who also like love clean beauty, that style by Liv. We have Shika, who's also going to be speaking with you today, which she's just a great friend of mine, and she shared her story about being also in an abusive relationship, and she also goes down and deep and talk about that. We share stories about motherhood, about postpartum depression. I've got really great, amazing guests like Ariana Davis, who's also an author, like Brianna Salas, who is an actress as well. And we talk about eating disorders and body positive and breaking generational trauma and social causes. So once again, I took all my stories and I said, let's find a community, let's create a community where we feel safe, where we feel heard, where we can be unapologetically ourselves. Because I'm who I am. I didn't apologize to you guys saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm bilingual and like I mumbled my words." No, I just said, "I'm bilingual, I mumble my words." I love my pink hair. I do love my pink hair. I just wanted to go back to natural. I have tattoos. Um I love Disney and on the other side, I guess. But and Schitt's Creek, you know what I mean? To be yourself 110% and whatever yourself is. That's the Always Believer. Moving on to my other 2 projects that I absolutely adore a lot is the Latina Podcast and exactly what it looks like and what it feels like. It is all about talking about all those topics that we constantly sweep under the rug in Latina culture. And there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot in every single culture, but with Latina, because it's so dear to my heart as well, for obvious reasons. We just wanted to create a space to say, let's talk about those breaking the generational trauma, all that guilt that we've always had about being 33 and maybe not married and not wanting to have kids, and that's not the end of the world. About being bisexual or being a lesbian, all these sorts of things. That's Latina in that kind of sense, that Latina podcast. And Kim Cole Myers is also another podcast that's all about horror authors and Halloween stuff and spooky, and I do that with my husband, and that's just a very cool project that we do have a lot of cool authors on, like Stephen King and things like that. But anyways, going back to what I was saying with who I wanted to be today, who I wanted to show up as today, which was mainly the Always Believer, hence when believing is the first step. no matter what I do, it is something that's within me. I listen to my intuition, I listen to my inner voice. It takes so much love and effort and kindness and patience for oneself to know that you're able to break those generational traumas, that you're able to create a world that you love, to understand that you aren't alone. The amount of people I've had on the show and off the show that I've coached, because I also became a coach, a life coach, a mentor, spiritual. I'm very spiritual as well. I read tarot cards. I do a lot of stuff, babes. I do a lot of stuff. Um, the amount of people that have told me, oh my God, I never talked about this because I thought I was the only one, is going to make me tear up right now. But because that's something I want to change. That's what I want to change. To make sure that through these stories we share, through me standing here, I'm not standing, what am I doing? Me sitting here, just looking at myself because, middle of pandemic, but knowing that you're listening on the other side of the screen, that throughout these 20 minutes I've spoken, throughout the next speaker, some way, somehow, you find yourself and you say, hey, we're not alone. I understand what she's going through. And once again, this is how Lisa and me line up perfectly in our intuition, in our message, in our vibes, because I love how she made this conference just like this, because it's something that made her really happy. And there's something so powerful about community. It's completely powerful. Oh my goodness gracious. So, where can you find me? You do have down below, as I can see myself, the campsite bio at Ariadna Arredondo. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me if you go to my webpage. You can find all the links there. My door is always open. You can always come talk to me. I'm going to take a short social media break because your mind, body, and soul, your mental health, your physical health, your soul health is the most important thing. And I feel like throughout a pandemic specifically, I feel like you need the most breaks possible to kind of regroup and talk to yourself and heal yourself and understand where you're at. So for me, it looks like more journaling, more reading, which I miss, more writing, which I also miss, but also taking a social media break. But that aside, you can always email me. It's always there. If you want to share your story, please hit me up. We're just wrapping up season 2 of The Always Believer. So once again, that's another place where you can find me. I have 3 podcasts. Feel free to listen to whichever one you like. But if we're talking about The Always Believer, down below, you can find us literally everywhere, from Spotify to YouTube to iTunes to Libsyn. Link in bio, link down below. Just it's all there. And you have up to next week, if I'm not mistaken, for now, 117 episodes, 117 different stories of women coming together where there's a lot of motherhood, there's a lot of everything in between. You don't have to, I'm not a mom yet. There's anything you can want to find, it's there. This is the best thing I got to offer for you because that's content that not only is it free, it's so useful. There's so much words of wisdom. There's, episodes where we cry, where we laugh, we're so real. And if you took anything away from this almost half an hour, is that I'm me. What you see is what you get. So the vibe of the podcast is very laid back. You're chilling at a bar with wine or with a chocolate milk. I could care less. As long as it makes you happy, that's where you're going to be. And that's the vibe of the podcast, for you to feel at home and cozy, and you just hear these interesting stories and you connect. There could be a coach out there somewhere for you. There could be another mom who's like, oh my God, I went through all this. And you're like, hey, I went through that too. And, and I guess last and definitely not least, that's kind of what's coming up for me, in the sense of check out the shows. For me, I am going through a transition mode. I'm also moving. That's gonna come up really soon. And that also means with a change of my content, because I want to add gentle parenting. Not a parent yet. However, because I've been a foster mom and an English teacher and all these sorts of things, and because I've been a person who wants to advocate for these little tiny humans that they are, and we do want to make a world a better place. I believe in gentle parenting. I believe in Montessori. I believe in evolving always. That's the key word, evolve, without a doubt. Yeah, so that's pretty much me. I know we have a bit to go just for now. And I think the thing that I always want to leave you off with for you to think about today, for you to be like, let's go within ourselves and let's find out who we are. What I always ask my guests, and Lisa can testify, she was on the show this month. So if you can't get enough of Lisa, go on and come on board. She was our first guest of July, so it's pretty easy to find her. I want you to write down, it doesn't have to be every day, it could be right now, it could be in this little small break. I want you to describe yourself in 3 words. I feel like this technique is something that a lot of people don't do or don't stop to think about themselves in that kind of aspect of like, who am I? How do I describe best myself? Because I've asked so many different people and I get so many different remarks and questions. And once again, even as a coach, it was like, oh, I've never put myself in that position, or I've never really thought about it. Like I can describe my partner or my kid or my cat, but myself, just 3 words. And then through those 3 words, find a way to incorporate those 3 things that you love to do about yourself, or like you love being who you are in your daily life. There's like little tips that I always love to give. Oh my goodness, I'm wrapping up, I know. And then my second to favorite thing basically is what you're thankful for. I love being thankful. I feel like that's something the world needs more and more, because the more thankful you are of your present moment, the happier you're going to be, the more things you're going to manifest. Once again, I'm spiritual. You're going to find a lot of that content on my page as well. Being thankful for the here and the now, because there's some point of your life in the past, like some point back then, you prayed, you thought, you manifested for what you have and what you wanted to have today. So when you take those things and start being thankful on a daily basis, you're going to see more and more beauty. And that was probably one of the first things that I did way back when in the day when I started therapy, and really appreciating, okay, I used to sleep in a car, but now I have, I share, an apartment with 5 different people, but at least I have room to myself. And little by little start building on that. I used to eat sandwiches every day because I had nothing to eat and I was like living in a car or like under a bridge. True story. But now I can eat pasta or I can eat rice, so on and so forth. It just keeps building every day. And lastly, be sure as a daily practice to write to yourself a love note. Write to yourself an affirmations, things that you want and you want to have, like you already have them, and get that self-love, self-vibe. Once again, to wrap up this half an hour little mix of who I am, a happy volcano, like Nancy from Reality Changer said, who was also on our episode this week on our show. Happy volcano it is. I'm happy to be here. My doors are always open. Start believing in yourself one step at a time. Don't look at the whole mountain. Just do it, that first step, and then the next step. And little by little, you'll get out of wherever you are. And from then on, you'll go do and fly.